all bowling is good. It doesn't matter if it's organized. It doesn't matter if it's a competition. All bowling
Right.
is good. And I agree with him.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show today, Mark. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I know we had a really good one before, and I think this will be a even better sequel. So for the people who have not had the pleasure of meeting you, tell us real quick a little bit about who you are and who you represent.
Yeah, so Mark Miller. I'm coming to you from Flower Mound, Texas, north of Dallas. I am the president of the International Bowling Media Association. I am a writer for Bowlers Journal International, for International Bowling Media. Sometime soon, hopefully BCM. I used to work for USBC
Mhm.
for almost 25 years in the on the membership in the magazine side, corporate communications side, and then after they made some changes, then I went on to the other side, which is on the writer's side. So I've seen this from both. What I do and what been doing is I've seen it from both ends, both from the kind of the dark side of PR and the so-called light side of journalistic side.
Right. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the organization that you're working with today. I hadn't heard of it before, but after learning a little bit about it, it seems like a pretty interesting organization.
Yeah, so your viewers and people may know it more so from its older names, the Bowling Writers Association of America, which did go back to I think it's 19, and then the National Women Bowling Writers went back to somewhere not too long after that. And so then what happened is as USBC merged in '05, we started to realize that just like with USBC, why did they have separate groups for men and women and all that stuff? Why did we need separate groups for men and women and stuff?
Right.
So the powers that be back in, I guess it was around early '05, '06, somewhere in that area, we said we need to merge our stuff. So we did initially under the BWA name, the Bowling Writers Association of America name. I think it was about 10 years ago or so, we started to realize as the scope of media was changing already with online websites, podcasts, blogs, all that stuff. We realized we're not the old traditional writer in a magazine or a newspaper, and maybe a few here on TV and radio. So that's why we
Right.
changed from bowling writers to, and also we knew we weren't just the United States. We also, part of what we did is we joined with the World Bowling Writers back around that same time. And so we said, hey, we're international. We do media. We don't just do writing. So let's change our name to to what we are. And so that's where people may not know our current name, but I think a lot of people recognize the BWA and NWBW names are our
Mhm.
predecessors. So we carried forward with some of what they did, kept some of their awards, and then expanded and trying to reach a broader audience. That's the biggest thing. When you guys
Mhm.
contacted us, it was really fascinating because podcasts like this, we're not, a lot of us older guys are not that attuned to the kinds of things that BAM and you guys and others have. So that's what we're really trying to spread the word on and trying to get more awareness of us to the so-called non-traditional media.
Yeah. So, I mean, largely what you guys do is it a matter of kind of publishing media in these different outlets or spreading, covering different events going on in bowling, or what
Yeah.
are some of the functions that you guys provide?
Yeah, most of those people who are, and I think when we talked the other day, the challenge we're running into now is that, so when I started with the Bowling Congress in '85, there were about 60 weekly or monthly bowling newspapers all over the country. There
Hmm.
were just tons of, I don't even know the number, but tons of bowling writers who would be assigned to write about bowling weekly, bi-weekly, monthly at their local papers. I mean, in big papers,
Mm.
Chicago Tribune, Milwaukee Journal, Dallas Morning News, Los Angeles Times, and many
Yeah.
others. Miami Herald, like Dick Evans and some of the old guys. I mean, these were icons of the industry, icons of the bowling writers, the ones who helped start this thing. But what's happened as throughout all these changes in the media and in the bowling world, a combination of, we lost a lot of these folks to age. Then media would dial back and they go, well, as their space got smaller, bowling was one of the things that maybe had to get cut from the normal rotation of, okay, we're going to cover this. You had one of the things that really changed is the growth of girls' sports in high school and women's sports in college, because now
Hmm.
that started taking up more of the limited space that, say, newspapers had. And so we got kind of cut out. We were one of the sports that kind of got cut out. And so there's really just less places today for our members to tell stories. Because that's really all. I learned this from Tom Clark, who's the commissioner of the PBA, was my boss for 3 years at the USBC. Before that,
Hmm.
he was the bowling columnist at USA Today, and I worked with him on a number of things. He always used to talk about our job is to find compelling stories about the sport, the business, and everything, and find places to tell those stories. And what's
Right.
changed in the industry is that, and again, the old days, you told those stories through print, for primarily. And now you tell stories through all sorts of things. Print is now one of many ways rather than maybe the primary way. That's the biggest difference in, to me, my knowledge, in terms of how our people tell our stories and where.
Mhm.
But now it can be in anything. It can be again, anything electronic, anything in the internet, anything, whether it's voice, video and that. So our challenge now is to find, number one, identify places that are doing things like you guys do, but then also trying to identify places that maybe the young people coming up could aspire to. That's the other thing Tom used to always talk about, is aspiration. One of the things we like to do is tell stories of big name people, like we did years ago. We had Deandra Asbeatty and Chris Barnes as our spokespeople for a lot of our programs at USBC, and initially Chris Paul for a while before he moved over to the PBA. The idea is to aspire to be these people. They love bowling. In Chris Paul's case, he's a basketball player who bowls well, but it's exciting. In the case of Deandra and Chris, they're lifelong top flight bowlers. Well, we want the girls and the boys to aspire to those things. And that's the thing that we try to do, is to try and create stories that tell the story of bowling both as a recreation and a sport, and then something that hopefully kids will aspire to in hopefully a growing number and in a new way of telling those stories. So yeah, to get to your original answer, yeah, our goal is to be able to write about whatever. It can be amateurs, pros, college, high school, the business, bowling centers, trends. It can be on anything.
So then what are some of the outlets you guys cover today? You mentioned a couple of different ones that you guys can produce in, but where are your outlets primarily today?
So we have, right now, there's about 5 bowling newspapers around. There are still, the biggest ones are Bowler's Journal, Bowling Industry, Bowling Center Management. Those are the 3 biggest of the traditional print. USBC, when I worked at USBC, we had 2 very large magazines. One was called US Bowler, one was called US Youth Bowler, that at the time, back in 2010, it was reaching about 3 million people, or 2 million people, I think it was at the time. And it went to every USBC member. If you were a card-carrying USBC member, you got this magazine 4 times a year. Well, they changed with the finances and the things that happened around between 2008 and 2010. They dropped that. And of course, later on, your readers probably know that they bought the Bowler's Journal, which is a much smaller publication. It's about 20,000 people versus 2 million people. And so it's that, but those are the big, at least right now, that I think Bowling Industry, I think, has 10,000. I think BCM has around 10,000. So right now, those are on the print side, the biggest places to tell about the sport. Then you have places like PBA.com, USBC has bowl.com, and their SBC a lot of their staff are members of our organization, and PBA. Those are the biggest features, if you will. And then again, some of these small bowling newspapers. There's one here in Dallas called the Bowling News. There's one in Minneapolis. There's a handful around. Some of them are online only instead of being in print. And then there's still a handful of people, not many, but a handful of people who do some kind of weekly column. We're trying to identify more of those because that group drops. And so we're trying to find more of those. But those are the biggest areas I think that we can reach right now. But again, with the non-traditional media and with some of these people having maybe thousands of followers, we want to tap into those and try and now grow. We do have, and one of the other things we're trying to do is get some younger membership, because a lot of us are over 65. And so we're trying to get more younger members to cultivate that growing non-traditional media.
And then what are some of the stories or trends, or what are you seeing out there today? Like what are some of the big topics you guys like to cover or see out there?
Well, you got on the pro side, of course, PBA is doing really well. Our people cover them everywhere from the staff itself at PBA to people at USBC to some of our writers covering, because obviously they're the most visible. They're on more of the time between January, and they just wrapped up now for the year pretty much with the league. So they're kind of done for the year for the most part. On the USBC side, we cover things like the Open Championships, the Masters, the Queens, the Women's Championships, some of those I've written. And then there's a lot for myself. I've been doing a lot of tournaments around the world for Bowler's Journal. There's the Singapore Open I did a story on. There's some tournaments here. Storm has a couple tournaments that they run. And then so we'll cover some of those. And then on the trend side, we've done stuff from the string pins. I haven't personally, but we had people talking about string pins in the media.
Yeah.
And the growth of those. And then the growth for a couple of years ago is virtual reality games and stuff like that. It's funny when you go to Bowl Expo, you get to see what is the latest and greatest and newest stuff. A lot of it deals with stuff that has nothing to do with the sport of bowling and has more to do with the recreation and entertainment of bowling. That's one of the things that a lot of things have expanded. Bowling industry does a thing called Amusement Alley, and the BJ does a thing about the non-traditional stuff. So there are this broader, and again, a lot of that has been because of the proliferation of family entertainment centers. That's one of the biggest things that I've seen over the 40 something years I've done this, is the change from the traditional bowling alley to the family entertainment center. So it's not all about bowling anymore. And I know you guys are very heavily into that with your marketing stuff. In the old days, it was basically you had bowling lanes, maybe a mom and pop, 12 lanes, and a bar, a snack bar with like pizza and popcorn.
Right.
And now you got these places that have world-class chefs, gourmet food. I mean, they're known, some of the centers now are known way more for their food than the bowling.
It's true, yeah.
Bowling is just kind of a part of it as opposed to the only thing. So that's maybe the biggest thing we've seen change in terms of the facilities themselves. And then on the bowler side, the biggest change is the sheer number of people. You have a lot of people, more people in the last 10 or 20 years, a lot of people who go bowling, but a lot fewer people who have gone bowling in a league setting than, say, when I started. There was like 5 or 6 million people. The peak of bowling was around 1979, 1980. There was about 9 million people going bowling every week. They were members of the 3 bowling congresses, which at that time was ABC for men only at the time, ABC for women at the time, and then American Junior Bowling Congress, later YABA for the youth. They had gotten down, they pretty much dropped for 35 consecutive years or something like that, even before the pandemic. And then the pandemic, of course, itself took a toll. However, the great news for the industry, and this is really cool for those of us telling stories, is that since the pandemic, and even after things have gotten somewhat normal, bowling is doing very well right now. And not only have a lot of most people come back, but they've been able to attract a lot of new people to both the sport and the recreation, because I think what the pandemic taught people is that we are creatures of being together. We're creatures of
social,
commiserating with each other. Now, whether that's on a regular basis, once a year or twice a year, whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's what I think you've seen a lot of, is the growth of just people playing the game in some way. And as Chad Murphy, the CEO of the executive director of USBC, likes to say, all bowling is good. It doesn't matter if it's organized. It doesn't matter if it's a competition. All bowling is good. And I agree with him, because once you get the bug, it can be in a clubby kind of fancy place where women are coming in high heels and all that. But if they enjoy the activity, there are people whose competitive juices will go, I think I might want to do this on more than just a fun basis. And so the more people you introduce to the game, whatever, then all of a sudden they turn to the sports side of it. And that's a key point, is that bowling is both a recreation and a sport. I equate it to like softball. You've got your beer leagues. You got your leagues. You may have played in some where you've got the keg of beer sitting at second base.
Right.
And if you pass it, you get a shot or a drink. And then there's tournaments, and then there's regular stuff. And so bowling has the same thing. Our challenge is that there are still media who don't believe that. They only see the recreation side. They only see the Friday night drinking league, and it's cigarettes, and which, of course, most places don't even allow anymore. That's actually another of the big trends over the years, is the whole changing of society from this smoking society to this non-smoking society on the indoor level. And that's really benefited bowling a lot. And that, so there's been so we've written a lot, our people have written about these various changes and the things that go on day to day, just the tournaments that happen on the competition side. So there's a lot of, the great thing is there's a lot of really cool people that up and coming out. I'm getting ready to write a story on a young kid here from Dallas who's 19 years old and has won 5 regionals, and he's going on tour next year. And so there's just some really, I'm doing something on Chris Warren. He's got 2 lanes of string pins in his pro shop in Plano, Texas. And I don't think anybody else in the world has that. So just different things that you can write about, just looking for interesting things.
Yeah, a bunch of trends in there, especially like you said, like the string. And I think the string even plays into the kind of FEC more mass appeal, just because they're the ones who don't really care. And I know it's tough for a lot of these guys to find mechanics. I think that's one of the biggest pushes in the string, is just being able to find someone to repair the old machine. So if you're going to get one and you don't know if you're going to be able to find a mechanic, string seems to be a viable option.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to Chris Barnes yesterday for this story on this kid, but we were getting to talk a little about that. He thinks it's not just the reason you can't find them is the bowling centers don't want to pay him. and
Sure. Yeah.
they don't want to pay them what they, as mechanical people, believe that they're worth, and
Yeah.
can maybe go and take that mechanical talent and go somewhere outside the bowling
Exactly.
industry
Yeah.
and make more money. And
Right.
so
And
there's
probably an
that.
easier job too.
Yep, and that, and the fact that there's a shortage just in general of skilled labor anyway, whether
Right.
it's anything mechanical or whether it's electrical, plumbing, all that stuff. There's a shortage of people involved in that anyway. So it just, that has really affected the bowling industry quite a bit.
Mhm.
So, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's
One of the big.
and it's interesting here in the Dallas area. We have several places that, I think I told you that the other day, that pin only. I mean, there's a place in
Mhm.
Texas Live, which is right between the Rangers Stadium and the Cowboys, of string pins there, and mecca of a lot of different formats. There's still plenty. There's still traditional centers, but there's these other ones, anywhere from to different ones like that are really unique, and we've written
Mhm.
about some of them too in the past. So it's nice from a bowling standpoint, from a trend standpoint. I am right in the mecca of kind of of where a lot of these things are trending and starting and experimenting.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big hubs. I mean, and then you have some big FECs too, Alley Cats or
Right.
Grand
Main
Station
event.
Entertainment, a bunch of those massive ones that
Yep.
kind of took it in more of a mass appeal.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't see
Speaking
that
of,
as much up north. Yeah, you don't see that much up north. I'm from Wisconsin, and there's not.
tend
Although
to be
we're writing about
smaller.
a new one up there that's coming in. It's
Mhm.
actually replacing an old. It's kind of a new FEC replacing an old FEC in the suburbs of Milwaukee. But it's still, you just don't see a lot of that even up north that much in the traditional.
Mhm.
They're much more. We talked the other day about like the Detroit, St. Louis, Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee,
Right.
Minneapolis. Those are still more traditional areas of bowling. It was interesting when we moved to Texas, when USBC moved to Texas 15 years ago. Milwaukee went into shock, I think. And it's, how can you leave us? You're bowling, we're bowling, and you're leaving for Texas. They were kind of
Right.
shocked at that. But there's a lot down here. I mean, bowling is huge down here.
Yeah. Speaking of bowling in Texas, are you going to the Southwest show next week?
In fact, I just reminded myself today. I'm hoping so. I got to send a note to Karen Miller, and because it's just up the street, and I'm hoping.
Yeah,
Yeah, you going to be there?
I will be. Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, great. We meet in person.
Mhm.
But yeah, I had a reminder to myself today that I need to email her. I know it starts on Sunday, I think, and
Mhm.
just up the road in Denton. So yeah, hopefully I'll get to see you there.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Come on out. There's going to be a bunch of great contacts there from all
Yep.
around.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, they do a nice
Uh,
job. Karen and the Southwest proprietors do a great job.
Yeah,
They,
no, Karen, Mike, Brian, all those guys, they
yep.
really have a strong association because some of the associations have a better participation than others.
Right.
Southwest seems to be one of the bigger ones.
Yeah. Well, and it should be big. I know a couple of the old shows, if I heard right, the East and West Coast shows, they're not holding them this year, I don't believe.
Correct. Yeah, they pivoted the East Coast show to the Edupalooza,
Oh, I didn't hear
and
that.
it's more just pure education based.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that out east? I know.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. It's tough. This time of year is really kicked off with leagues.
Yep.
You just went to Bowl Expo a couple months ago, so it's not like a ton has changed, and it's hard enough to get out the first time. So I think we've seen some of the membership dwindle, and they just said, "Hey, let's just pivot to this education first approach."
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that one. I'll have to look into that. When is that?
Usually mid-October.
Yeah, they used to do it in Atlantic City. I went to it years ago.
That's where it is. Mm-hmm.
Is it still? They're just changing. Yeah, I had a book. Yeah, I was out there about in 2012. I had written a book on the history of bowling that, fortunately for me, sold out in 2017. And I went to the East Coast show. That was one of the big first shows I went to kind of sell the book, and it was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cool.
Yeah, I wonder what you could fetch on eBay now that they're sold out. You can't get them. Probably pretty.
There's
high
some.
price.
I know Amazon still has some. I see them out there every so often, and I'm sure they're used or whatever. I mean, we sold
Signed copy could be worth a couple $100.
Yeah, I sold about 3,500 of them myself. So,
Wow.
and I another about a couple thousand that Amazon sold. So that was about another 500 or so that Amazon sold. So that was good.
That's really cool.
Absolutely.
So, Mark, tell me a little bit about maybe where you see things going. Obviously, we talked about the trends you've seen. Maybe some about the trends you see progressing or in the future, continuing, changing. Next 12 to 18 months, what do you see on the horizon?
Well, that's a great question. From our standpoint, and I think I told you the other day, we have created a visual media awards program that we're starting here in 24 for things that have been done in 23. We want anybody who does a podcast, a video thing, online thing to send and submit. We need them to be members. We want them to go to bowlingmedia.org to sign up and become a member, because you got to be a member to be entered. But that's from our standpoint, that's the thing is, we want to grow our membership. We want to grow our presence. We want to grow basically our relevance, if you will, in the bowling world from that standpoint. The string pin thing, because I think right now, I think it's I think the case there in the next 12 to 18 months for that, I think, is how many more centers, both new and current, go to the string pin format. The interesting thing the traditionalists are afraid that string pin will be the only game in town someday, which I don't believe.
No, I don't think so.
I
Yeah,
don't either.
it's it's different enough. Yeah, I mean, there's a
Yeah.
different
And I
play
think
with the strings.
And USB-C was great when they did all their testing and now have certified a separate level
Right.
stuff and that was the way to go. I think that's the way to go. And that way
Hmm.
people can choose. Now they're trying to figure out if there needs to be some kind of average adjustment. I know they're doing some bowler tests here in the Dallas area right now.
I've
Um,
always heard 1 to 2 pins per
Yeah, it'll be
per
interesting. Years
piece.
ago, when they did the sport bowling, I don't know how familiar you are with the sport bowling stuff that they did a number of years ago, and they had an average adjustment there. That one was a little more. I think that was about 5 pins, if I remember right.
Hmm.
And I don't even know if they still use that or not. But so it's good that they're doing that. But I just see the main trend is I think you're going to see more string pin. I'm hoping it's more in new facilities, or I'd like to see facilities that have a split, perhaps, and you have some 10 regular free fall and
Hmm.
some string pin so that maybe you can attract, because as we mentioned the other day, the key to me in success for bowling centers, you have to have that mix. It can't be all entertainment. It can't be all competition. It's got to
Right.
be some kind of mix. The model that seems to work, I know here in Dallas, is kind of leagues Monday through Thursday and then a couple scattered leagues on the weekend, and then a lot of parties and tournaments and
Yep.
open play and that on the weekends. And I think that seems to be
Hmm.
the success. What a lot of them have said have been successful. But the other thing that I think would be good, and I'm hoping this continues the trend, is the growth in the number of bowlers that are out there and the number of people who convert from just casual bowling to some kind of regular bowling.
Hmm.
Doesn't have to be hard nosed competition, but just something that is regular in some way.
Hmm.
It can be every other week. It can be once a month. It can be something. And what can we do to get to grow our numbers again? And I do think that the fact that they have grown the last 2 or 3 years, I think, is testament that they can continue to grow. So I think
Hmm.
that's the more exciting thing for the industry is that it's come out of the pandemic even better than it went in, and with some heartache in between, obviously.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
but then
Yeah, I mean
what
it's
I
America's most accessible sport. I think it's something
yeah,
like 70 million people bowl
something
once a
like
year.
that. Yeah, yep,
Yeah. So as a marketer, I looked at it as your top of funnel. Like that's how many people who are interested in some point, and then your job as the proprietor is to kind of bring them into, like you said, more and more frequent. Whether
yep,
that's a short social league or maybe down towards 35 sanctioned league, but
yep.
just you're bringing them in into your funnel.
It's something for everybody. That's, I think, the biggest thing that proprietors have learned in the last 15, 20 years is you can't jam a 30 something week league on everybody. It's not going to work. That's the biggest thing. It was funny. I wrote that in the last chapter of my book, and it's still true. America obviously is different today than it was in the 1970s and 80s in terms of people don't want to bowl 30 something weeks of the year straight. Women work out of the home, no other time. They're not daytime women's leagues. Bowling centers are sometimes worth more. The land is worth more than the
Yeah,
centers. So
I'm out of business.
yeah, and so it's just what bowling has tried to do, and I think they're doing a better job of it, is trying to meet and address the changes that society is. It's not necessarily bowling's fault, but what is bowling's fault is we don't do anything about it. If you don't do the things you
Mhm.
need to do to understand, okay, here's the way things are today, and you need to do things differently than you did maybe when you were younger and coming up. And if you do that, I mean, you can be very successful. Bowling can be a very successful business, whether it's a family or whether it's a corporate. It could be very successful if they put the effort into it and really look to what do your customers and potential customers want and see what you can do to give it to them.
Mhm. Yeah, it's always that product market fit, right? How do you
Yep.
serve them well? And the cool thing about bowling is that obviously there's some variable costs, but the majority of your costs are fixed. So
Yep.
once you get over the hump, it becomes a very profitable business.
Absolutely.
So it's just getting
Absolutely.
past that and getting the volume in.
Yep. And the good thing now is that, and I think Frank DeSocio talked about this a few years ago,
Mhm.
those centers that have survived, especially in the last few years and especially through the pandemic, have and will continue to do well. I mean, we don't
Mhm.
obviously have as many as we used to, and that's fine.
Right.
But
Yeah.
those you'd
Helps the
rather
one still
have,
in business,
yeah, you'd rather have
survivors.
everybody succeeding. You'd rather have a smaller number succeeding than half not succeeding and half succeeding. I think that's just better for
Mhm.
the industry.
Yeah, I think that's one of the trends that's really helped in the last 2 years. We'll see if it continues or not, but that the number of not just bowling centers that went out of business, but restaurants too, or other
Yes.
things to do in town that went out of
Yep.
business.
Yep.
If you're still in business, people still want stuff to do, so you collect all that business.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
So I think it's a good time to be in the bowling industry. It's a great time to be a writer about it, a
Hmm.
great time to be a marketer about it, like you guys. And there's a lot of stuff out there to share. And the other thing I think that's been a big, I forgot this earlier. The other thing that's kind of big is a lot of bowling centers. When I started, bowling centers saw each other as the enemy. They saw each other as competition. And I think one of the biggest changes now is I think the younger proprietors especially have seen, no, we're not, we are all part of a pie, and
Hmm.
we can keep a part of that pie. Our competition is other entertainment venues, whether it's sports, movies,
Yeah.
concerts, even the yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, because a lot of people just stay and play at home, and
Hmm.
gaming and stuff. Those are the things that are our competition. So it's good to see that. I think people in the industry realize that we're not each other's enemy, and we never should have been, but they
Yeah.
did. They sure did back in
Yeah.
the 80s and 90s. Boy, I tell you, you can't
Right.
steal my league, or I'm going to have a lower price than you across town to brawl. That didn't work. That
Yeah,
didn't.
I would argue that across all ages that they're very open. And in fact, Mark, this podcast wouldn't exist if it weren't for the proprietors and their willingness to share. Because I
Yep.
can call almost any of up and say, "Hey, what's working for you?" And they don't drop a beat to say, "Hey, here's what's working for us. Go try
Yep.
it at your place."
Yeah, that was one of the things we were always big at USBC was sharing of successes, whether it was our
Hmm.
associations around the country, whether it's proprietors. It's, hey, if it worked in the state of Washington, it can work in Texas, it can work in Maine, but you need to know about it, because the best ideas and shared ideas is the way to go. And so that we were always a big stickler for that kind of sharing ideas around the
Hmm.
country.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sharing ideas, Mark, if people are interested in sharing some ideas or learning about the ideas that you guys are sharing, I should say, where should they go to learn more about the International Bowling Media Association?
Yeah, our website is bowlingmedia.org. We're also on Facebook. Just type in Bowling International Media Association. You'll find us on Facebook. We'd love to have you
Hmm.
join us. Try to get some conversation started there. And that's our primary tool right now. We were on Twitter at one point, but I think we've kind of lost that a little bit. And so, but you look at Facebook and our website; those are our big areas. And again, membership is on there. All our press releases are on there. Our award winners, we have a lot of award winners. We do Bowlers of the Year, Senior Bowlers of the Year, and then we have honorary things like for our Hall of Fame, and somebody who's been the biggest in who's done the most for the industry. And so we have about 8 major awards that we do. And hopefully take a look on there and see, and hopefully nominate some people. If you know
Hmm.
somebody who you see the criteria and you think that somebody might be worthy of it, please nominate them to us and let
Yeah.
us know. That's how we find out about things, is somebody tells us.
Yeah, I love that. And you guys are doing a pretty cool job. I mean, you have been doing a good job for a long time of covering what's going on.
Yep, we appreciate it. Yep,
Mhm.
we're going to do better. We're doing okay, but we need to do better, and that's our plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this has been fun, Mark. I'm sure we could continue talking about bowling all day if we were allowed to,
Yeah.
but I want to be respectful of your time. Really, thank you for coming on. This has been a blast, and looking forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think right when I get off here, I'm going to contact Karen and see about getting in. I've got to get that done.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll be seeing you soon.
All right, Forrest. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Take care.